Coming up on Arirang News, a South Korean military plane lands at Incheon, carrying nearly 380 people from Afghanistan, people who worked with South Korea in the past, and their families who are escaping the risk of reprisals by the Taliban. The Bank of Korea raises its key interest rate by 25 basis points, making Korea the first developed country to raise rates since the start of the pandemic. Local stocks were mixed on the news. And President Moon Jae-in attends an event in support of Korea's venture businesses, pledging support for the country's so-called second venture boom. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. The Bank of Korea has become the first central bank of a developed country to raise interest rates in the pandemic. The rate is up 25 basis points to 0.75%. Policymakers concerned about imbalances caused by ultra-low rates. The BOK will be watching what this does to the household debt situation. Min Soo-kyun reports.
The Bank of Korea has raised its benchmark interest rate to 0.75% from the previous record low of 0.5%. The decision was made during the central bank's monetary policy meeting on Thursday morning. It's the first rate hike since November 2018. The central bank had made several slashes to its key interest rate since then, and during the coronavirus outbreak, it cut the rate to 0.75% in March last year and once more to 0.5% in May last year. The BOK explained that the decision was made after taking into account several factors.
Despite the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, a solid economic recovery is expected to continue following vaccine rollouts and robust exports. Also, because the inflationary pressure is projected to remain high and financial imbalances continue under the eased monetary policy, we have decided to raise the key interest rate by 25 basis points. The BOK will gradually make adjustments to the rate in line with the country's economic recovery.
Experts say that further adjustments could be made in the next two rate-setting meetings in October and November.
While it's not easy to forecast when exactly a rate adjustment will be made again, it is likely that the central bank will closely watch how the growing household debt and inflationary pressure are affected by Thursday's rate hike.
The central bank also kept South Korea's economic outlook for this year unchanged. It projected a 4% growth in GDP for 2021, the same as the previous forecast made in May. This comes as exports and facility investment remain strong, along with improving employment figures. On consumer price inflation for this year, the central bank expected it to be 2.1%, up from an earlier forecast of 1.8%. This is largely due to rising prices of petroleum products and agricultural, livestock and fishery goods, as well as increasing service prices. Min Soo-kyun, Arirang News.
South Korea's finance minister is pledged to start providing relief payments to all but the highest income households before the Chuseok holiday in late September. In a meeting Thursday on emergency economic measures, Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi said funds of 250,000 won each, or about $215, will be dispersed to all those whose income is not in the top 12%. Also by that time, he said the government will also pay out 90% of the so-called Hope Recovery funds allocated to help small business owners. The government and ruling party have agreed to fund a new wide-ranging assistance program for young people. It'll include cash to help them pay rent, college scholarships, and incentives to encourage firms to hire more people. Jang Tae-hyun reports.
To help out young adults struggling amid the pandemic-hit economy, the South Korean government has allocated more than $17 billion for financial aid. Officials from the government and the ruling party say it includes support in 5 areas, including housing, education, and jobs. First, cash aid of $170 a month for a maximum of 12 months will be offered for rent. The requirements to be eligible include earning less than 60% of the median income. That is roughly $1,000 per month, and there are approximately 160,000 eligible recipients. The country will also give national college scholarships to more people on low incomes. And there are 2 groups that can receive a full ride. They're the 3rd child onwards in families in the bottom 80% income bracket, and the 2nd child onwards in families getting basic living aid from the government. Vocational high school graduates who could not get enough hands-on training can also take additional classes related to their specialty. The government is also giving a grant of $8,200 to small and medium-sized enterprises for each person they hire. And for job seekers, an existing program will be expanded to help 20,000 people by giving them some $2,500 to buy items that can help them find a job. Chang Tae-hyun, Arirang News.
South Korea's presidential office held an event on Thursday to review the accomplishments of the country's so-called second venture boom in small business and to look ahead to the future. There, President Moon said that he wants South Korea to become a global venture powerhouse and said that the government is going to back innovative startups. Hong Yoo reports.
20 years since South Korea witnessed its first venture boom, the country is flourishing again with newly created companies creating new jobs and new industries. Welcoming the second venture boom during an event called K-Adventure on Thursday, President Moon Jae-in announced that South Korea will aim to become a global venture powerhouse.
벤처기업인 여러분, 앞으로도 정부가 힘껏 뒷받침하겠습니다. 창업부터 성장, 회수와 재도전까지 촘촘히 지원하여 세계 4대 벤처 강국으로 확실하게 도약하겠습니다.
President Moon outlined the government's policies to reach such a goal. First, it will focus funds in new promising industries to revitalize startups coming up with innovative technologies. To back rapid growth of venture companies, the country will nurture human resources personnel and promote an inflow of funds. That includes a new fund worth $850 million for high-risk startups. The government will also revitalize the mergers and acquisition market by making a new M&A fund worth $170 million to help listed companies actively use funds to merge venture companies. South Korean ventures have been exploring diverse sectors including bio, health, manufacturing, and service of information and communication technologies and retail. Many are successfully entering the global market too, including the e-commerce company Coupang, which has been listed on the New York Stock Exchange. The travel and leisure platform Yanorja has secured $1.7 billion from SoftBank Vision Fund. The number of unicorn companies or startup companies valued at over $1 billion has increased 5 times from 3 in 2017 to 15 this July. These newly created companies have contributed to creating new jobs. In just a year from June 2020 to June 2021, startups have created 67,000 new jobs in South Korea. Around 70 people, including venture investors, the heads of unicorn companies, and other entrepreneurs took part in the K-Adventure event virtually, during which they were able to listen to some success stories and receive advice from heads of successful startups and investors. Hong Yoo, Arirang News.
Data from the semiconductor industry suggests chip companies are getting ready to ramp up production in the months and years to come. Firms in North America making equipment for chip manufacturing posted a 50% increase last month in billings. That's according to Semiconductor Equipment and Materials International, an industry group. It says in July, companies billed for around $3.8 billion, and it was the 7th new high in a row. Semi projects the chip shortage to continue, but the purchase of new equipment could enable chip makers to boost supplies 18 to 24 months down the road. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Kim Se-won, professor of economics at Ewha Women's University. Professor Kim, good afternoon. Thank you for coming on today.
Good afternoon, David.
Well, the big news today is the Bank of Korea becoming the first central bank in Asia to go ahead with a rate hike, up by 0.25%, now to 0.75. It was May last year that the BOK cut rates to an all-time low. Tell us about this rate hike, Professor, and what you think it means.
Today's Bank of Korea's interest rate hike is not 100% expected in the market. Actually, more people have expected that Bank of Korea would leave the key interest rate at 0.5% this time because of the situation of Delta variant. Anyway, Bank of Korea's decision to increase the key interest rate indicates the end of low interest era in Korea. The two main reasons for Bank of Korea's interest rate increase are higher inflation and financial imbalance represented by huge household debt. Since Bank of Korea has changed its monetary policy from expansion to contraction, Bank of Korea will try to increase the key interest rate at least one more time by the end of this year, depending on economic situation, particularly on the spread of Delta variant and employment recovery. But it should be noted that higher interest rate in Korea is a bad sign for economic recovery and stock market.
And you mentioned imbalances, and this rate hike comes as Korean households take on a record amount of debt, in most cases to buy homes. And despite a range of measures taken by the government to get that under control, in the second quarter, debt rose to around 1.8 quadrillion won, which is more than $1.5 trillion. Some say this is like a ticking time bomb. How does this play into the rate hike decision?
As we talked about, one of the major reasons for increasing interest rate is rapidly increasing household debt, which raises financial market-wide risk in Korea. After recognizing the risk of huge household debt, government has been trying to control the increase of household debt through diverse policy tools like DSR, which imposes a strict limit on individual loan. But finally, it was not that successful at all. Household debt has continuously increased and finally exceeded 1,800 trillion won, or 1,540 billion US dollars as the end of second quarter. So Bank of Korea's interest rate increased by 0.25% this time, and another 0.25% increase next time will decelerate household debt increase. However, higher interest rate will give serious economic pain to the hardest hit people by coronavirus pandemic, like small business owners and self-employers, because these people are already sitting on huge debt to maintain their business. Government should pay more microscopic attention and support on these parts of the economy.
Well, switching gears here, Professor, the Federal Reserve Symposium at Jackson Hole is this week, and ahead of that, U.S. stocks rose to all-time highs on Wednesday. The S&P up the most, about 0.2%. What's the story in the global markets?
The stock market on Wednesday in U.S. Continued its general upswing over past few days after U.S. regulators gave full approval for one of the COVID-19 vaccines, and before the good hopes from the Jackson Hole meeting, and manufacturers got additional boost as a government moved toward September vote on a roughly $1 trillion infrastructure bill. Therefore, as more investors expect the peak of Delta is close and concurrent U.S. economic rebounds, U.S. market gained yesterday. Particularly economically sensitive stocks and banks led the market to another set of fresh records. Dow Jones Industrial gained by 0.1%, and Nasdaq also gained by 0.2%. But European markets were mixed over London's 0.3% return and Frankfurt negative 0.3% return. And all Chinese markets declined due to further industrial restrictions by Beijing. Shanghai lost by 0.7% today.
And today, Korean stocks were mixed as investors digested the news of the rate hike. Retail investors, net buyers on the Kospi, foreigners returned to net selling. Tell us about the domestic market.
As you said, the movements of foreign investors in domestic market became very important, because they are preparing for possible tapering from the United States. Domestic market went up in early trading session this morning, but as soon as Bank of Korea's interest rate hike news arrived, market turned down to negative reason. Kospi had negative 0.6% return, but card stock has 0.3% return today. Foreign investors are selling domestic stocks continuously related to the increased tapering possibility in the U.S. The sales of foreign investors amounts to 490 billion won, or 0.4 trillion US dollars, which is slightly larger than recent average sales amount by foreigners.
And finally, Professor, Korean lawmakers are working on next year's government budget, and what the ruling party has come up with is a proposal of around 600 trillion won, which is a record. It's well over $500 billion. That's about equal to all of this year's government spending, including the extra budgets they passed. What do you say about this budget and its sheer size?
Korean government is preparing, as you said, the largest regular budget in history of about 600 trillion won, or 513 billion US dollars for next year. If this budget is confirmed by Congress in the fall, it would mark a 7.5% annual increase from this year's budget. Government argues that this super budget is necessary to maintain expansionary fiscal policy like emergency catching out program and to stem the fast spread of highly transmissible Delta variant. But we have to remember that government budget partially financed by government debt, which is our kids' economic burden a long time after. So it is highly expected that government debt to GDP ratio, which is a barometer of fiscal soundness, exceeds 50% next year, almost for sure. So it is time to pay more attention to rising government debt seriously.
All right, Professor Kim, we'll have to leave it there for today. Thank you, as always, for sharing your insights with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Hundreds of evacuees from Afghanistan landed in South Korea just moments ago on board a Korean military plane. They arrived a little later than originally planned due to stricter security screening processes. For more, we have our Yoon Jung-min joining us live from the country's main gateway, Incheon International Airport. Jung-min, what's the latest?
Right, Evan. So most of the Afghan nationals just arrived here at Incheon. Well, this afternoon, 378 Afghans who have worked with the Korean government as well as their families landed safely in South Korea on board a Korean military plane from a stopover in Islamabad. A total of 391 Afghans are set to be brought to Korea, and sources say the remaining 13 evacuees are currently in Islamabad. South Korea has sent 3 planes for the evacuation, and the remaining group will be taking another one of the planes, but it's not yet been announced when they'll depart. These people have worked with South Korea for years in Afghanistan at the embassy, hospitals, and vocational training centers. They asked the local Korean embassy for help due to concerns about possible retaliation by the Taliban. Well, according to a defense ministry official, nearly half of the 391 Afghans are children. A deputy defense minister for policy, Kim Man-gi, said in a radio interview today that among the evacuees are some 100 infants and around 80 children aged between 6 and 10. He dismissed any possibility of these people having ties to the Taliban, adding they have gone through a stricter screening process.
So, Jung-min, they're now on the ground. They've been strictly screened. And where will they be taken at this point? Naturally, there would be some quarantine measures taken as well.
Well, you're right, Tevin. So upon arrival, they're being tested for COVID-19, and sources say this could take hours. And those who tested negative for coronavirus will be sent to local government facilities in Chungcheongbuk-do province. Well, while there, they are likely to get additional PCR tests. The Foreign Ministry says they will not be given refugee status, but instead will be treated as persons of special merit. And from now on, the Justice Ministry will take care of their settlement, including visa issues. At first, they are likely to get a short-term stay visa and then have their visas switched to a long-term ones. Back to you, Devin.
All right, Yoon Jung-min, our Foreign Ministry correspondent, reporting there from Incheon International Airport. Thank you for that. And now new cases of COVID-19 in South Korea are still coming in near their highest levels day after day. On Thursday, though, the country had the most deaths on a single day since the start of the pandemic's fourth wave. Ji-young has more.
South Korea has reported its highest number of deaths in a single day since the fourth wave of the pandemic started. The Central Disease Control Headquarters said Thursday that 20 people died the day before, and this puts more pressure on the authorities to secure enough critical care hospital beds, which have been running out in some regions. The health authorities said that in the last 7 weeks, there have been 177 deaths. 13 of them were people aged between 20 and 40.
58% of all critical cases in the pandemic have occurred during the fourth wave.
She added that in the last 7 weeks, amid the rapid spread of the Delta variant, the highest number of infections have been among people aged 20 to 40. South Korea on Thursday reported 1,882 cases, a decline of 272 from the day before. All but 53 of them were local cases, and 64% were in the capital area. New daily infections have been above 8,000 every day since early July. The health authorities said the social distancing measures imposed in the capital area, now at the highest level, have been effective in curtailing the spread. But some experts say that while the distancing measures have been effective in that regard, they have exacted a disproportionate social cost. They're also calling for reforms to improve their effectiveness and social equity. The government will be announcing special quarantine measures for the Chuseok holiday before the end of this month. Ji-young, Arirang News.
Today marks the first day of COVID-19 vaccinations for people under 50 in South Korea. Inoculations for 18 to 49-year-olds began nationwide, with some 11 million people scheduled to get their first dose over the next 5 weeks. Those getting the jab this week will receive the Pfizer vaccine, with shots alternating with Moderna in the weeks to come, depending on supply. And as rollout begins for the country's largest age bracket, authorities hope the mass inoculation will take first dose coverage to 70% of the population by the Chuseok holiday in September. It aims to administer second doses by the end of October to reach its target of 70%. In terms of statistics, more than 27 million have received their first doses so far, nearly 53% of the nation. That number will be rising daily, with this age group starting to get their first doses. The South Korean government early in the pandemic gave temporary approval to so-called telemedicine, and data show more than 600,000 people made use of these services last year. This is according to the Korean Medical Association. It says between February and September last year, nearly 610,000 people used telemedicine, and there were around 8,000 participating hospitals and clinics. The services sought out the most were internal medicine, followed by neurology and psychiatry. There were high rates of usage in areas with surges in coronavirus infections like Daegu and Seoul. Though demand was high, 8 in 10 doctors surveyed said they were not in favor of telemedicine because of concerns about patient safety. South Korea's foreign ministry summoned the Japanese ambassador to Seoul, Makoto Hayashi, today to express deep regret over Japan's announcement of plans to dump contaminated water into the ocean from the Fukushima nuclear power plant. He was summoned by the director of the Foreign Ministry's Bureau of Climate Change, Energy, Environment, and Scientific Affairs, Lee Dong-gyu, who delivered a statement on behalf of the government opposing the plan's decision announced yesterday by the plant's operator, TEPCO. He underscored the need for Japan to sufficiently consult with and inform the international community and urged Tokyo to swiftly establish a bilateral council to discuss the issue. Japan decided in April to discharge the water into the ocean, and details came out yesterday saying it would start in 2023. The K-pop superstars BTS continue to top the charts week after week, and this time they're at the top of the Billboard Artist 100 chart. The Billboard chart released Wednesday showed them back at #1 a week after they went down a spot. The Billboard Artist 100 chart measures the overall popularity of artists through sales and the number of times their music has been streamed. BTS are the only group to have topped that particular chart 20 times, thanks to their recent hits like Butter and Permission to Dance. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.